Good mythical afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is Mr. Ayala with another video lecture for you. This is 2.4 Spain in America. As always, please make sure that you are writing down the information as it is shown on the PowerPoint, and that you are listening to the information I'm saying so that you are able to add additional notes to your information. So please sit back, relax, turn off the YouTube or music or anything in the background, and let's get started. So we have two objectives. You'll be able to explain why the Spaniards began to invade South America, and secondly, you will be able to explain how so few conquistadors were able to defeat the two most powerful tribes in South America. So we start off with the idea of a conquistador. So a conquistador were Spaniards that came over to the New World, both North and South America, with an idea to explore, conquer, and settle the New World. So this whole idea that there's all this gold and silver for these conquistadors was extremely tempting. Most of these were middle or younger children of small noble houses. So they wanted that wealth because the wealth always went to their older siblings. Well, older brother to be exact. But the problem was most of these tales actually ended up becoming false, except for the Aztecs and the Incas in South America. So we're going to start off in 1519 with Hernan Cortes. So Hernan Cortes lands in Mexico to try to defeat the Aztec Empire. I do apologize for that jump cut right there. So what ends up happening is they want to attack the Aztec Empire because they heard of all this gold and silver they had. And the Aztec Empire had all this gold and silver because they would go around and they would attack neighboring tribes and take their wealth as tribute. Sometimes even their young teenagers to use to sacrifice to their sun god. So within 2 years, Hernan Cortes, with the help of the neighboring tribes that the Aztecs took over, and the diseases that the Spaniards brought over, were able to defeat the most vicious, most warlike group in the Americas. And they end up with lots of gold and silver going to Cortes and the country of Spain, which made them extremely wealthy. So Spain becomes the major power during this time period. After that, in 1533, we have Francisco Pizarro, who invades the Incan Empire in present-day Peru. So what happened was the Incan Empire was just finished a civil war amongst two of their leaders. And their leaders were considered a god and weren't even allowed to touch the ground. So they were carried in a litter, something like this. And what ends up happening is Pizarro is invited to meet with the Incan ruler to try to come up with this idea or some way to get the Spaniards to go away. Unfortunately for the Incans, the Pizarro captures their leader and says, "Hey, if you don't want me to kill your god, god king, I will execute this Incan ruler." So all the Incans scatter and they collect all this gold and silver. They bring it back to Pizarro. He's like, "Thank you," and then executes the king anyway. And because the king's executed, they just went through a civil war and they have no wealth. This throws the Incans into disarray, and Pizarro ends up defeating the Incan Empire, which is the largest empire in the Americas by landmass at this time. So why did Spain win? Well, they won because there was these new animals like horses and dogs that they never saw before. You got to think about it. If you never saw a big war dog and it's barking and drooling and snarling, and a horse, it smells weird, it's large, it makes weird noises, it's wearing like armor, it's going to freak you out. And these new weapons, guns and cannons, like sticks that shoot fire. The Aztecs and the Incans never saw these things before, so they're going to freak out. They're going to be like, "What the heck is this?" So it's going to make it even easier for them to defeat them. So they also used Native American allies against them, and especially the Aztecs. And because these Native American people were invaded by the Aztecs, the Spaniards came up with the idea, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. So it said, you hate the Aztecs, I want to conquer the Aztecs, let's work together to try to defeat the Aztec Empire, which they did. And then the biggest thing was actually disease. So two major diseases from Europe, smallpox and the plague, came over, and the Native Americans had no immunity or resistance to their disease. So while they were being attacked by the Spaniards, about 50 to 90% of their people were dying from smallpox and or the plague. It is kind of difficult to defend your country or your empire when the majority of your people are dying or sick. And so I do want to show a real quick picture of smallpox. So if you don't want to see it, just kind of close your eyes. I'll tell you when I am done, and then so you can open your eyes again. If not, here it goes. So this is a picture of smallpox. This is one of the last few cases. Smallpox is now considered extinct in the wild. So what happens, it's kind of like evil chicken pox, and these are all like little bumps full of white pus, and it goes inside of your body, inside of your mouth, your lungs. So if you notice, he's actually got some inside of his mouth and going into his lungs, and most people end up dying by drowning on their own pus from the smallpox. At least this is extinct. All right, it's gone now, so you can look again if you don't want to see smallpox. So in 1513, Juan Ponce de Leon was looking for gold in Florida and found none. But King Ferdinand, being kind of derpy of Spain, was still pleased. He's like, yay, you found a new piece of land, so set up a settlement. So he tries to set up a settlement on the western coast, and he's actually ended up being attacked by the Calusa. And this is a Native American tribe that will later be integrated into the Seminoles. And they absolutely destroy Ponce de Leon and his settlement. So then in 1528, we have a guy named Panfilo de Narvaez, who arrived in Tampa Bay to also try to create a colony. This failed because of a group known as the Appalachians. They showed up, and yet again, being extremely warlike, as they live in Florida, defeated and destroyed the Spaniard settlement. So, but then France shows up, and France wants La Florida because of its location. If you look at where Florida's location is, it is in the middle of the Atlantic and the Gulf of Mexico. So if you're going from the Caribbean and you try to go to Europe, you have to go past Florida. So Florida is a great place that you are able to steal these Spanish treasure ships or any other trading vessels in the area. So in 1562, Jean Ribault of France lands near Jacksonville and creates a fort named Fort Caroline within 2 years. In 1565, Spain responds by building their own fort known as St. Augustine by Pedro de Mendez de Aviles. And this is actually still around. It's now the longest permanent settlement in North America. So France tries to send ships to remove the Spaniards. Then a hurricane destroys their ships. Go figure. Natural disaster destroyed an army. Well, actually, navy. So Spain then moves out of St. Augustine to destroy Fort Caroline. And they kill everyone but the women and children and take the women and children for themselves. So France is out of La Florida, and Florida is more or less completely controlled by the Spaniards, even though they have different Seminole tribes and pirates, making this a major problem. So from there, we have Hernando de Soto of Spain, who heard of these tales of the 7 cities of gold in the Southwest. He ends up going to what is now the Southwest part of the United States, gets lost, and then dies of a fever. I mean, you got to think about it. They have no GPS. They have no idea where they're going. So he's just wandering around, dies of a fever, and the expedition just kind of falls apart. Then you have Francisco Vasquez de Coronada of Spain, who travels through present-day Arizona and New Mexico. He met the Zuni during this time, one of the last people, or I should say Europeans, to meet them. He also never found gold, and his expedition just kind of slowly disappeared. So you have De Soto, who dies of a fever, and Vasquez, who just never finds anything, and his expedition just starts to fall apart. So exploration is a very dangerous and difficult thing to do. So there are 3 main goals of colonization. 1, I want to spread my version of Christianity, either Catholicism or Protestantism. And I want to increase my wealth, which was based off of spice, gold, and land at this time. There are 3 types of settlements. Pueblos, which are towns for trading. Missions, which are religious communities, used to spread religion, in particular for the Spaniards, it was Catholicism, and a presidio, which is a fort. The Spanish settlement also has a caste or class system. We're going to review this in class. At the top, you have the Peninsulars, which are people born in Spain. The Creole, which are Spanish-born people in the Americas. And the Mestizo, which are mixed Spanish and Native Americans. These will become the Hispanic cultures like Puerto Ricans, Cubans, Colombians, etc. Native Americans, and then on the very bottom, enslaved African Americans. And in the West Indies, the Spaniards used plantations to grow crops that they needed a lot of labor. So they used slaves. They either used Native Americans or and then later they would end up using Africans. So thank you for listening to this video, and as always, don't forget to be awesome.